Joe Morton, I think it's safe to say by now that Rowan Pope, or Papa Pope as he's more affectionately known, has become one of the most beloved characters on television. Uh, did you think that, I mean, you came onto the show towards the end of the second season for like 5 episodes. Did you know then that you were going to be sticking around for this long?
No, not really. I mean, because when I came on at first, it really was just to do those 6 episodes. I suppose what happened is it was so successful at the end that they asked me to come back, because I actually was on my way to Broadway. I was going to do Romeo and Juliet on Broadway. But once I said I was on my way to do that, that's when Shonda said, "Oh, no, 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 we'd like you to stick around."
Yeah, you stuck around, and then you won an Emmy in the very next season. You've become a series regular. Talk about, because this role is so atypical for you in your filmography. I mean, you usually play the good guy, the
Right.
sort of hero of the piece, and this guy is one of those lovable villains. Talk about playing that.
Well, I mean, yes, you're right. Most of my career I spent doing good guys purposely, because when I first started in this business, the kinds of roles that were being offered to black actors were mostly, pimps or drug addicts or boogaboos of one sort or another. So I made a decision not to do that. But by this point in my career, I actually went out to LA during that particular season looking for a bad guy. I thought it would be really interesting to find someone who was very smart and who was a villain. And no sooner did I think that, because I really didn't have time to talk to my agents about it, started watching Scandal on Netflix, and then got a call almost immediately. After watching Scandal, I just sort of fell in love with it. I thought, oh, this is really, really well written, really well shot, et cetera, et cetera. And before I had an opportunity to talk to my agents about maybe getting on that show to try to find something to do, I got a call from my agent saying that actually ABC wants to talk to you about coming on to Scandal.
Look at that. So talk about that initial meeting with Shonda Rhimes.
There actually was no initial meeting. Basically, it was a producer on the phone who offered me the gig with the caveat that there was a secret involved. And the secret was that I was going to be revealed at the end of that season, as everyone remembers, as Olivia's dad. But I couldn't tell anyone. So Carrie didn't know about it. No one knew about it.
Wow.
And so the very first time I met Shonda was at our very first table read.
No kidding, huh? So then what was that meeting like? I mean, when you talked about what the character was going to be.
Well, it was very exciting. I mean, we didn't really talk about what the character was going to be or where it was going. If you remember, at the end of season 2, he was kind of this very shadowy guy who was telling either Scott Foley's character or Jeff Perry's character what to do and how. It didn't really begin to blossom as Rowan, per se, until the beginning of season 3, when I was given that wonderful monologue that I delivered to Olivia about the hell and the high water.
That monologue is so great. And it's so, I think that one of my favorite aspects of the show, and a lot of people's favorite aspects of the show, are, I guess, what you'd call those Rowan Pope moments,
Right.
where you just like let loose and you deliver these speeches with this Shakespearean vigor. Talk about playing those scenes as an actor.
I mean, they're glorious. Nowhere else that I can imagine on television do they write monologues for characters. Usually it's, one character says something, there's a response, and then you move on. This gave me the opportunity to sort of do what I wanted to do, which is to go to Broadway and do Shakespeare, and at the same time be on TV. The monologue was gorgeous when I read it. When I had the opportunity to deliver it, when we finally sort of set up to shoot, it was just an amazing sort of moment both for Carrie and I, because that's the first time we really, really worked together. Because all at the end of season 2, the only time we worked together was in the limousine at the very end of season 2. So this is our first moment together as father and daughter. So that also made it exciting.
And the relationship between the two of you is so interesting. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about that. It's father-daughter, but there's a lot going on.
It's developed over the years in terms of, obviously, because when we did the scene in the limousine, we had no idea what our relationship actually was, because there was no script up to that point. All I said was, hello, Olivia, and she says, Dad. And that was it. And even for that, we had to shoot it 4 or 5 different ways because, again, we didn't know exactly what their relationship was. Once we started to get into season 3, it began to develop that clearly it's an untoward relationship, that he is a man of tremendous power who will also do anything and everything he can to protect her when at the same time he's going after whatever political piece of power he's after. But always she's first and foremost in his mind in terms of someone that needs to be protected.
I think that's what's so great about your character too, is that, I mean, he's a villain, but there's an underlying humanity there because of his daughter and his wanting to protect her. You know, I mean, it's a very layered kind of character. You know, it's not one note, which is.
It's truly layered. I mean, that's what's wonderful about it, is that even as it's developed just in season 5, which just passed, things have looks like they're going to get even more complicated. It looks as if she's becoming more like her father, which is an interesting thing. I mean, to see what that develops, because we started off very far apart. We would come together to make attempts at sort of father-daughter stuff, like having our Sunday dinners. There was attempts at her trying to stay out of my way, but my always sort of getting in the way to do whatever it was that I had to do, but always pushing her towards power, always pushing her towards what Rowan feels to be the best thing for her in the political and social arena.
Mm-hmm. Now, in that 3rd season, you won an Emmy Award for your, I think it was, what was the name of that episode? Guess Who's Coming to, I keep wanting to call it Guess Who's Coming.
Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I was like, no, that's the name of a movie, but it could be the name of that.
I think it also is the name of one of our episodes as well. So. Okay,
yeah, I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss like a clever twist on that when I was. What did that recognition mean for you? And also, why do you think that episode really connected with Emmy voters?
Well, you know what? I think it's an odd thing. You're supposed to submit an episode, but I think ultimately what happens is, since this is a peer-oriented award, that is, other actors have to vote for you, I think it's usually not so much just one episode. I think it's usually the course of what you've done that particular season. And for me, it was I was purely satisfied with having gotten the nomination. I mean, there were so many people in that category who had been on TV a lot longer than I had, who had been, in some cases, acting longer than I had. So winning the award was both a relief and a surprise. I don't remember. I mean, I guess the first moment was I sort of took a deep breath, sighed, hit 5 with my girlfriend, walked up on the stage in a kind of haze, not knowing what exactly had happened, which is why I think the following day I took that picture of me in bed with the Emmy, because it felt like a dream.
Mm-hmm. Well, you bring up, I mean, you've had a long career in movies before you ended up on Scandal, and you've done a wide variety of movies as well. I mean, looking at your filmography, you've done independent films with John Sayles, like Brother from Another Planet and Lone Star. You've done big action blockbusters like Terminator 2 and Speed. You've had some guest spots on TV shows like Homicide: Life on the Street and Good Wife. So I guess I want to, what do you look for in material? Because it's such a wide range of roles.
Well, it depends. I mean, obviously, I think mostly what I'm looking for is, one, just really good material. Brother from Another Planet was just gorgeous in terms of the way John had written it. The 3 films I did with John were really wonderful. And his point of view is mostly about laborers and management, or something to that extent. So that's why I gravitated towards that. A lot of the larger movies, to be honest, were a way to subsidize, if you will, doing the smaller things. Terminator 2 happened, again, it was kind of a surprise. I went in and auditioned for James Cameron. And James, at one point, asked me why I wanted to do this particular film. And what I told him was a joke that Richard Pryor had told me, which was that Hollywood very often kills off black actors at the beginning of sci-fi films, or they're not in sci-fi films. Richard Pryor said, because Hollywood thought we weren't going to be around in the future. And I think that's what got me the role with James Cameron. So it really was a variety of things. with a lot of the roles, they were probably politically motivated in terms of most of the stuff I did was probably saying something, had something to say. A lot of the larger movies were simply large paychecks. I knew I was just going to have a good time. Speed obviously didn't have anything to say, but it was a wonderfully constructed film. I mean, it's like a roller coaster. You know, the faster the slower you go, the more in trouble you're in, and so it was just a fun film to do. So a lot of those larger films were there because it was fun. A lot of the smaller films were there because they had something to say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So talking about movies and television as well, you've got a role in the film All the Way, where you play Roy Wilkins, the prominent civil rights activist. How did you get involved with that?
Again, sort of the normal ways. You know, I got a call from my agent saying I was being offered the role of Roy Wilkins in All the Way. I had seen the play the year before, loved the play, I loved the idea of what the play had to say. To play Roy Wilkins, who was at that time the head of the NAACP, and also his point of view was very different than the members of SNCC, so that he's in constant kind of conflict with what they wanted. They wanted things to get not so much more violent, but more aggressive. So he's trying to get them to do what Martin Luther King wants them to do, which is to be more nonviolent at a time when things were getting more violent in terms of the way the South was responding to the civil rights movement in the South.
Mm-hmm. And how did you find the character for that? I mean, I'm guessing you.
Well, and I did a lot of research and just looked up Roy Wilkins. I mean, the interesting thing about doing Roy Wilkins is that from a political standpoint, we differ. Joe Morton would have had a different point of view than Roy Wilkins, but I thought it was clearly important to present what sort of conservative, if you will, black men of that time period were sort of trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Now you're also in an off-Broadway play right now called Turn Me Loose, which is all about Dick Gregory.
Yes.
Talk about being in that. How did you get involved there?
Again, sort of the normal ways things happen. I got a call from my manager saying, you know, there's a play, it's about Dick Gregory. I certainly knew who Dick Gregory was, knew him as a humorist, knew him as an activist, knew him as a nutritionist. And here was a man whose prescience went beyond his years. I mean, the things that we talk about in Turn Me Loose are things that he talked about 40 years ago that are still happening today. Things like racism, things like income disparity, things like corporate greed, all of the things that, and nutrition. I mean, he talked about it way back then in terms of sugar not being good for you and the rest of it. So as a whole, was something I really wanted to talk about and really wanted to say. And it is a play that's more or less a one-man show, so it's mostly me for an hour and a half. Its responses have been very strong. The reviews, I haven't read them, but I've been told are quite powerful. The audience leaps to its feet almost immediately at the end, because I think it's not only a play that will take you through any number of different emotions, everything from crying to laughing, because Dick Gregory was a wonderful comedian. But when he talks about activism and he talks about all kinds of things, it will take you through a gamut of emotions. So in that sense, it's quite a full and satisfying play, not only for the actor, but for the audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned earlier about how all you'd ever wanted to do was do Shakespeare on stage. I mean, I guess it must be a real kind of rush doing live theater every night, since you've done so much work in film and television.
Yeah, I haven't been on the stage for about 5 years. So it's a breath of fresh air. I mean, it takes a great deal of effort and a great deal of energy to do this play, but at the same time, as I say, it's wonderfully satisfying. It's great to be back in New York doing a play on an off-Broadway stage. I mean, it's what kind of every actor hopes for, and we're at the moment hoping that this play will transfer to Broadway.
Well, I hope so too. We'd be talking to you about Tony nominations, maybe. Well, Joe, thank you so much, and congratulations on all your work this year. And it was a real pleasure talking to you.
You too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.